Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing the keynote speaker today, Dr. Tiera Coston. Her talk will focus on mentoring philosophy and how having a mentoring philosophy can improve your teaching and also enhance students' learning. And also, a mentoring philosophy will help build a stronger relationship between the student and mentor. Dr. Coston is an educational improvement specialist in the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Faculty Development at Xavier University in New Orleans, Louisiana. She oversees several programs, such as a mentor training program called Preparing Mentors and Advisors at Xavier University. She oversees a mentee training program for individuals entering research at Xavier University, and additionally, she manages an mentee to mentor program. She has served in higher education for more than 15 years, and her work focuses on the improvement of undergraduate STEM education and the use of mentoring to enhance student success. She is a National Research Mentoring Network certified facilitator who has conducted more than 100 workshops on a variety of topics such as mentoring, teaching, and learning. We're very grateful today to have Dr. Coston as our keynote speaker. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Coston to UMES.
So I first want to say thank you, Dr. Stahl, for that wonderful introduction. I was wondering if I was listening to you talk about me. So good morning, everybody. I am thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be participating in this conference, and I look forward to our time together. I'm hoping that you will get as much out of this as I'm trying to give. As you listen to me, I hope you understand that I am a huge advocate of teachers and teaching, no matter what the level. And I'm also a huge advocate of mentoring in that context. And so I'm going to attempt to connect those two for you and show you what I believe to be a high impact. It must be important, don't worry about it. What I think is a high impact practice that is easy to implement. Let me take that back. That is not as difficult as some other things to implement, and you can see a lot of results from it. So I will go ahead and start. And also I would love to say that I don't want to be a sage on the stage. Feel free if you have questions. I'm hoping that this will be a conversation as you learn more and you hear more. So just have at it if you want to. So I'll be talking to you today, as Dr. Stahl said, about mentoring philosophies. And I believe it's a great reflective tool that you can use to help enhance your teaching. So I want to talk first about the objectives, my intent for today. And you're going to hear me talk about a lot today about objectives, about purpose, about mission, because all of those things are important in us getting where we want to be, especially talking about this topic today. So I would like to demonstrate the interconnection between mentoring and effective teaching, introduce the idea and the value of a mentoring philosophy to improve your teaching, provide resources and guidance for crafting your mentoring philosophy, and one that reflects what you believe as its creator, and provide the opportunity and support for you to begin to craft it here today. So I want to start off by giving you some context, because I think it's very important to put the things that we're going to say today in a context. And here is what I'm really hoping you'll understand, and that is, it doesn't matter what type of institution you come from, what level you're at, these are universal principles that can apply. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I come from and help you to see that it's applicable where you are. So I am from Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans. Xavier was founded by St. Catherine Drexel and the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, so it is a Catholic university. It is also a historically black university. It was set up by Mother Catherine, St. Catherine now, I have to get used to that. St. Catherine and the SBS, specifically to serve blacks in the early 1920s. And our mission is to contribute to the promotion of a more just and humane society, specifically by preparing our students to assume roles of leadership and service in a global society. And specifically our mission, I think I found it, the pointer. Our mission focuses on the learning and the teaching environment. And let's talk about UMES, since this is where we are and this is the context. I decided to take a look at what Eastern Shore's mission looks like. Of course, this is a land-grant institution, also historically black. And also you can see the mission focuses on learning and the learning environment. And I found those similarities between our two missions. And so right now, I want to just remind you what a mission is and what the purpose is. And again, this brings us back to why we're here and why we're talking about what we're talking about. It's a pre-established and self-imposed objective or purpose. We have a reason for doing what we're doing, and we want to keep that in mind. So I want everybody here, so does everybody know their institution's mission? I don't mean verbatim, but do you have in mind your institution's mission? So take a moment to reflect on that mission. Think about as it focuses on teaching. Does it focus on the environment of the teaching? Because those two things are very important, especially, well, for some of you is everybody here from an institution, an educational institution? Anybody not? We have a few people who are not. So you're welcome to focus on UMES's. But in all seriousness, think about your institution's mission and think about what you do in the classroom to fulfill that mission. How does your mission inform what you do in the classroom? And I want you to keep that in mind as we move throughout today. So a little bit more about context. Xavier has about 3,000 students, 75% of whom are undergraduate, and 25% of whom are graduate professional, most of those being in the College of Pharmacy. And this is the kicker. Of our undergraduates, 79% of them come in majoring in one of these biomedical disciplines. The bottom line is when students come to Xavier, they are thinking two things. They are thinking medical school and pharmacy school. I want to be a physician and I want to be a pharmacist. And I point that out because, and it's not a statistic I have up here, but I can tell you as far as the pre-med majors, 75% of those who come in majoring in pre-med change their major. And so that's something we have to deal with as educators. When those students come in and they say, I want to be a doctor no matter what, and they don't end up on that path, it becomes an issue. And it's our job to get them where they want to be and where they need to be. So our demographics, historically black, 72% of our students are African American, and 75% are also female. And another important thing that I want to point out, our faculty. We have approximately 223. Once again, we're a small institution. 37% of our faculty are white, 35% African American. But as you can see by this, the majority of our students are African American or black, and I want to be clear, this is not our judgment, this is how they identify. While the majority of our faculty are not. And the point here is that it is very likely that in the classroom, these faculty are going to engage with students with whom they do not necessarily share a cultural background. And that can't matter. You have to deal with that because that is what it is. So this is the context in which we prepare our teachers, as our faculty as mentors. So I just want to touch a little bit on the science of, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me keep this up. Is everybody okay with hearing me? I'm going to get a lot louder now. Okay, so I want to touch briefly on the science of mentoring. And the reason that I want to do that is because to convince you that a mentoring philosophy will enhance your teaching, I want to be able to support what I'm saying in that mentoring is extremely important. So I just want to take a few moments to do that. And one thing you'll notice about me, and I don't want to apologize, but it's what I do in the classroom. I am a huge fan of metacognition. And what I do in the classroom is when I tell my students we're going to do something, I always tell them why. Because that gets me a lot of buy-in when they understand there's a purpose. So I hope I'm not coming off in any way other than my intent is I tell you what I'm doing and I tell you why I'm doing so that you're like, okay, I can understand why we're going here. So interventions such as mentoring, so mentoring itself, can have a large impact. It can increase research-related skills, participation in different things, traditionally where people are underrepresented, particular students are underrepresented in those areas, so you see more participation if they're mentored, increased self-efficacy or belief that they can accomplish something. You see increase in GPAs when students are mentored, and I'm going to show you an example of that a little bit later. And retention. And I don't think there's a single institution out here who is not looking to get better retention. Despite all of the positive impacts of mentoring, it is well established that members of underrepresented groups still receive less mentoring than their well-represented counterparts. So despite the fact that we know this, there's empirical evidence to support this. When you talk to these particular people, they are still saying we are not getting the mentoring we need. So we have to challenge that. We have to fix that. When you talk across the spectrum, no matter what level you talk to about mentoring, whether you're talking about professionals, whether you're talking about students, these are the things that they are looking for in a mentor. They want someone who has admirable personal qualities. Nobody wants to be mentored by someone they look at and doesn't think that they're a good person. So basically you have to represent to that mentee that you are a good person and it's worth looking at you as a model. That includes being honest, altruistic, and this is a tough one. Honesty is not, it sounds easy, but it's not. Being able to listen, being enthusiastic, compassionate, being able to communicate well. Someone who's committed. One of the biggest drains on a mentoring relationship is time. And if you don't have the time to commit to that, it's going to be a tough road to go. Someone who's experienced, someone they can look to and say, you have walked the road I want to walk and you have experience here, so I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. Someone who can guide their career, that is, give them an introduction to those professional networks. Someone who's a mentoring legator, meaning they're willing to institute policies and model within the institution what these types of relationships should be. Someone who is culturally aware and responsive. I don't know if you all are aware, but participation by people of color, by people who were traditionally underrepresented in higher education is on the rise. These different groups are being represented in higher ed now more than ever. So you have to be, as a mentor, you have to be culturally aware. You have to be willing to assist them in feeling like they belong there. They should be there. Teachers who actually prepare themselves as mentors, here's what the research shows. They increase their potential to enhance student growth and development. So when a teacher prepares him or herself as a mentor, it actually impacts what goes on in the classroom. They help students maximize their educational experiences. They enrich their own teaching and professional development. This is not completely altruistic. Teachers also benefit when they do this. They gain exposure to new and diverse populations. They improve their coaching and listening skills. They find work more meaningful and satisfying. They hone their skills, particularly leadership, and they can re-engage in their profession. They can re-engage as teachers. So there's a lot of evidence out here that if you approach your teaching from the standpoint of being a mentor, you can enhance it overall. An example, the one I wanted to show you briefly. So in this is a study done by Bowen et al. Back in 2013. And this is a particular intervention that is called self-affirmation, sorry. It's called self-affirmation. And so what they were looking at in this particular study was, if we engage in these self-affirmation exercise with these students, and these were middle school students, I believe 8th graders. If we engage in these self-affirmation exercises with these students, what is going to be the effect on their grades? How are their grades going to look over the course of time? And so for those of you who are not familiar with self-affirmation, that's an entirely different workshop. But the idea is, it is. And do we have psychologists in the room? Because maybe that's why they're chuckling. But yes, this is a whole body of literature that says if you hone in on that part of a person that helps them to affirm themselves, know they're a good person, not necessarily about the subject matter that they're learning. As a matter of fact, you don't want to even touch on that. You are touching on things that they hold valuable. If you can get them to affirm those things on a routine basis, you can affect their performance in the classroom. And there has been a ton of literature. Clyde Steele, back in the 80s, started this, and there has been a ton of studies ever since then to show that this is actually a real effect. So, self-affirmation. So what they did with these students, they conducted the self-affirmations, and they gave them, so they divided them into two, and I'm going to make this very simple. They've divided, because none of these psychological studies are simple. But they divided them into two groups, and they gave one group an affirming affirmation. So one that affirms them, and they gave the other group a neutral one. And so the neutral one said, think about the following list of values. And they just listed the list. Choose the one that is least important to you. So of all the things that are there, the one you don't care much about, write for 15 minutes about why this value is not very important to you. Might be important to some, but might be important to someone else. So that's what the neutral group received. The self-affirming group said, think about a value, belief, talent, or skill you have that you are proud of. Write for 15 minutes about this positive part of yourself and why it is important to you. And so that's the difference. So here's what happened. So here for the two groups is what happened. For the group who did the affirmation, the self-affirmation, you saw in their grades over the course of the quarter, there was pretty much a steady rate in the grades that they earned over the course of 4 quarters, or the year, the school year. For the neutral, you saw a decline over the course of the year in their grades. So it's not very much of a difference, but you do see the difference between those students who had the neutral affirmation and the positive affirmation. There was a second part to this study, and this is the more important part to me. In addition to giving the students the affirmation, they also had the teachers participate on the back end. So the first time the students did the affirmation, the researchers collected all of the things and everyone went on about their business. In the second part, they added the teachers were to take only the positive ones, not the neutral ones. They took the positive affirmations and they read them. So the teachers had to take them and had to read them. And here's what happened. So here is, and you'll see, there's neutral. So the one neutral, you see the same sort of decline over the quarter as you saw here. The affirmation, you see the same sort of steady state that you saw here. Here's the neutral plus teacher, and again, they had the neutral affirmation that the teachers then read on the back end. and that is this one, and you see a decline. And here, you see the affirmation plus teacher, and you see the grade here. You see the higher grade here. There's a slight decline over the course of the quarter, which seems to be a trend, but you see it has the highest grades up here. And in speaking to those teachers, what they found was happening was the teachers were beginning to know their students. By beginning to read those the responses to those self-affirmations, those prompts, the teachers began to understand the inner workings of their students. So while they might come in the classroom and interact with them on an academic level, when they were taking those affirmations home or those writings home, they were able to see what was making those students tick and what was important to them. And what that caused was the teachers to change their behavior in the classroom. They started to realize biases they may have had or just assumptions they may have had about certain of their students that they didn't even realize they had. And when they began to read this, it's like, okay, James does tend to give me an issue, but I didn't know this was happening with him. And now that I understand that, I see James a little differently. And so that's what the researchers attribute this even higher grade level in when you have the affirmation, not just a change in the students, but a change in the teachers. So the bottom line is there has to be critical reflection. That self-affirmation study, which was just a way to engage in critical reflection. It's necessary to develop professionally enhanced teaching effectiveness. You have to go through this reflection. And it allows you to gain new perspectives on the thoughts and actions and question assumptions that you previously had, just like the teachers did in that study. So I propose to you that developing and periodically revisiting your mentoring philosophy is a way to engage in that self-reflection. And it can reflect itself in your teaching if you are willing to do that. So my question is, how many of you all have a teaching philosophy? Sorry about the mic. Yeah, that's about usual. How many of you have a mentoring philosophy? Okay, nice. We have a handful of people who have a mentoring philosophy. Well, this is usually the case that you have a lot fewer people with a mentoring philosophy than a teaching philosophy. And I want to be able to distinguish between the two so that you understand. Some people, once we do this, they actually fold their mentoring philosophy into their teaching philosophy, and that's perfectly fine. But here you are focused on different things. So it is a statement that explains and justifies the way you approach personal and professional relationships with students as you guide their development into professionals. So it is an actual written statement about how you view this, what you hold valuable in those mentoring relationships, and how you carry them out. Why do you write one? It helps to keep you focused. It helps to remind you, okay, what's important to me? Because everyone in here knows in the classroom, it gets tough sometimes. And as higher education changes, as we move forward, it gets even tougher. I know on our end, and I'm sure you all are no different, we deal with a lot of underprepared students who want to go to pharmacy school, who want to go to medical school. They're not even ready for basic college algebra. And we have to deal with that. You can share this with your students, which I will take you back to Metacognition, again, a different workshop, but it is something that once they understand where you're coming from, they understand you better and they understand that you are there for them. So I'm an advocate of sharing it with the students. You can, as I said, you can fold it into your teaching philosophy. It can also help with your grant writing. Again, not completely altruistic. Who's taken a look at a National Science Foundation funding opportunity announcement lately? Not even lately, within the past year. The bottom line is if you have any kind of proposal that involves working with students, a mentoring plan has to go with that proposal. It has to be a part of that proposal. And your mentoring philosophy is a great place to start in creating a solid mentoring plan that's going to look good in one of those proposals. Typically included and on your table, there are handouts. It's in the middle of the table, but you're going to see writing a mentoring philosophy, and there are a whole lot of questions on there. Some of those things you are going to want to address, other things not so much. I want to reiterate, this is completely a reflection of you. If it doesn't fit with you, then leave it out. If there's something there that resonates with you that's not on that sheet, add it. It's about what your values are. But you want to include what you see as a mentee, a mentor, how you define learning, your view of the mentee role. I find that most helpful when I do share my mentoring philosophy with my students. One of the things, because I always tell them what their responsibilities are. It's like, I owe you, but as my mentee, you owe me too. And I think that helps to have that conversation. If your view or your outlook on the mentoring role, your goals and expectations for the relationship. We don't always have these explicit conversations with our students, especially in the context of a classroom. This is a great way to do it. How the mentoring methods and evaluations, a personal context, and this is just what you have on the table. So I'm gonna skip over that. What I did want to include, and there is a professor of English in here who said on yesterday, she used the word just. I'm just English. Is she here? She's not here. Okay. Well, this is one of his name is Dr. Ronald Doris. He is indeed a professor of English at Xavier, and this is his mentoring philosophy. This is what he wrote after we did a mentoring philosophy workshop, and this is what he came back with. And one of the things he sent it to me, and he asked me, is this right? And I wrote back to him and I said, first of all, it's beautiful, but my question is, does it reflect who you are, how you approach mentoring? And he said, yes. I said, then it's right. But I wanted you to take a look as an example at what he had to say and how he presented himself. And I can tell you, I don't have other examples up here, but mentoring philosophies vary in length, they vary in content. But again, I can pick the people that I know out of a room. If somebody put 10 mentoring philosophies in front of me and 10 of my faculty, I could tell you who is who based on what is in that mentoring philosophy. And that's what I want to reflect you all. So take just a couple of minutes, read this, and just begin to think about the kinds of things that you would include. And if there are any questions while. Yes. You're welcome.
Will your presentation be made available? Will it be posted anywhere?
I will provide it.
We can actually post it on our conference website.
So you put, let's say, afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How long is a mentoring philosophy?
That's a great question, and that is up to you. The question was, how long is a mentoring philosophy? The only thing I would limit, because I call it a high-level document. I don't know if you all have ever heard of like mentee compacts and contracts where you sort of sit down and lay out expectations. You don't want to get into that level, into the weeds in terms of, okay, I expect, a report on this once a week. So you want to stay away from those things. I have seen them run from one paragraph to about 1.5 pages, and all the ones I have seen, some of them, and the top in length I've seen at 1.5 pages. Yes.
How do you approach students who may be adverse to mentoring relationships?
And the question is, how do you approach students who may be adverse to mentoring relationships? I think that is an excellent question, and I'll explain why. I seldom, when I get into a mentee-mentor relationship with a student, very seldom do those words even come up. So if I'm approaching a student, say I see a student with an issue, My initial thing is whatever context we're in, the classroom, something else, it's like, okay, let's sit down and talk. Make some time with me, come to my office hours. Okay, I see you're having an issue. I see there's a problem, and I am here to help you. Tell me what's going on so we can figure out what we're gonna do together. I never bring up those words. And typically and this is typical, it's not always, when a student sees that you are truly caring about them, you're taking the time to ask what's going on, because this is not typical of you, your behavior is a little odd, I see this going on in the classroom, they begin to see, okay, maybe I can trust you. And as that relationship, it is a matter of building that foundation. It's not gonna happen, okay, you're my mentee, I'm your mentor, let's go. It doesn't typically work like that. And so over time, as they see you really are their advocate and you really are there to help them, it's gonna happen organically.
I mean, those who lay out a plan to help them, and then you just
That is, now I got you. There is accountability, and that's where that honesty I mentioned a while ago, that's not always easy. And I've had those too. Despite my best efforts, there was nothing I could do. Those are ones but you have to make sure you do your part. And that is, I want to be clear about my expectations of you. You have to be crystal clear. This is what I'm willing to do for you. I'm willing to go to bat for you, but these are my expectations of you. And after that, you have to hold them accountable. It's like, okay, we agreed on this. What happened on your end? That requires time and it requires effort. And at the end of all of that, you're still in that place, you can tell them, I've done all I can. I don't know what else to do. When you're ready, let me know. Yes.
Yes, my concern has to do with individual versus group mentorship, so to speak.
Yes.
So we're keeping it real. So we're to start with Black institutions. And students say, okay, well, yeah, so you do anything for her. She's your mentee. You favor her. And so that's a concern I have, is that I've got 250 students
yes.
that I'm responsible for. And so I am always concerned, with that when I'm working with someone, and someone else says, well, we know you have a special whatever for him, whatever the case might be. I tend to be not a tough love person. If you want to get ahead, I can show you how to do that. I know the path. I've done it many times. I can show you the path if you want to get there. But if you don't want to get there, I'm not a tough love person. So I find, personally speaking, a mentorship, I respond to people who want to move ahead. But on the other hand, there are those who say, well, why are you doing this for him and not for me? And my answer is generally speaking, well, I have no indication that you really are, interested in her. But now that I know that you are, let's get busy. So again, some advice on the individual versus group mentoring conundrum would be helpful to me.
Honestly, you just answered it. The conundrum is always going to be there. And that's true. We're human. That's true of all of us. You have an affinity. Think about it in the classroom. And you're asking questions. You're trying to prompt, responses. You're trying to get some formative feedback on what's going on in the classroom. You will tend to direct questions in your view to those students who typically answer them. You don't even realize you're doing it sometimes, but that is what you do. And that student who never says anything, you have to consciously make the effort to go back there and say, Mr. Jones, I have not heard from you today and I need your melodious voice. Come on, talk to me. So it's the same thing in mentoring. What I do, you're not gonna get around it, but mine is transparency, metacognition. Within the classroom context, I am constantly saying things like, folks, I am here. Thank you for those of you who have already taken advantage. I've talked to a few of you and we have worked this out. I make them here. Other people are moving. If you haven't seen me, other people have. And I do that constantly just to let them know it is up to you. I can only offer so much. It is up to you to take that next step and take what I offer. But it is, when I tell you it is constant, I am constantly saying things like that. That's the way when I'm in the context of that group. And it does prompt some and it doesn't prompt others.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I wanted to point this out specifically because again, I don't know if any of you caught the the state of higher education, the state of race and ethnicity in higher education. The report came out earlier this year, and it's not good, ladies and gentlemen. It's not good. Like I said, participation of underrepresented groups is as higher than it's ever been. That is wonderful. But those groups are not finishing, and it's particularly African Americans, blacks. They are not finishing, and when they're not finishing with the highest level of debt than any other group. So there's participation, but we're not getting what we need. And so I specifically put this in here because I don't think with the current climate in higher ed that anybody's mentoring philosophy is complete without some statement or some way of addressing your cultural awareness or sensitivity. So I put that out there because I just think it's an important thing to do where we are right now.
Could you restate the name of the study?
Oh, I'm sorry. It is the state of race and ethnicity in higher education. And I think February 19 is when it came out. So take a moment. I should take a look at the time. I can't see the time. Okay, thank you. So just take a moment to reflect on what your mentoring philosophy would be. And think about those elements. And I'm talking simple words or phrases that you would want included. If you don't walk out of here with anything else, I would like you to have that list. So when you are ready to sit down and do this, you're like, okay, just off the top of my head, these are the things that I want to address. So just sit down and take just a couple of minutes to jot those things down, please. Yes.
Could you give us a couple of hints on where to start?
Sure. Okay. So I would definitely, for me, I would start off, what do I pledge to do? As a mentor, what is it that I have to do to make this relationship successful? I know that I have to be available. So I'm going to talk about my availability to you. I know that I have to communicate with you, and not just communicate with you, I have to communicate effectively. So I am going to talk about, and that goes into my accessibility, how I'm going to make sure you're understanding what I'm saying and that I'm understanding what you're saying. I already spoke to cultural awareness sensitivity. Thinking in the context of class, what I would do or what my responsibility is in terms of your learning. And I'm going to turn right back around right after that and say what your responsibilities are in terms of your learning. So I'm going to always be prepared. I'm going to always be there to make sure I'm there to deliver it. But at the same time, I expect you to do the same. So it's those kinds of things. And that's why, and I don't want to say too much because it does take a bit of reflection in that when I think about yourself in the context of your class, what's important to you when you walk through that door? One of mine is, and I literally state this, I was like, sometimes I just don't feel so great. But when I cross that threshold, it's take a deep breath and good morning, folks. I am thrilled to be here and you have to be too. So let's do this. Sometimes it's an act, but it's what I commit to. And so in mine, I commit to bring that positivity and high energy to every class. That's my commitment to you. I need you to do the same. Would anybody like to share just a couple of things they wrote down? Yes.
Like I said, I've never written this, so
Okay. It's okay.
as a mentor, I hope to be transparent in sharing my challenges that I have overcome in the efforts to strengthen the challenges that you will overcome. I will provide questions, projects, and ideas that will challenge the very fabric of your existence in the hopes that just like a muscle, it will tear and cause micro tears so that they can be filled with greater things and that you will become stronger in your efforts.
Nice. What is your discipline? What's your discipline?
One is the professional golf management.
Really? I would have stuck you in biology. Yes. Nice.
Sometimes when we are dealing with a student, it's not just learning. They are dealing with a lot of environmental factors, and they cannot separate themselves from all those factors surrounding them, which impact their learning.
Right.
As a mentor, one of the things also I can do is to bring the best out of the student.
Yes.
Because sometimes they all hear
I want you to hear what she's saying.
to bring the best out of the students. Sometimes they always hear negative about themselves. They don't know how to empower themselves.
Correct.
And yes, as a mentor or as a teacher, I want to bring the best out of the students.
Thank you. That's exactly right. And that's the kind of stuff you say. And just to go back, you all know this. Half the battle is teaching. It's half. The rest of it is everything they bring into the classroom with them. A part of my mentoring philosophy does state, I will understand you as the whole person. Because you are not just a student sitting in my classroom to learn biology. So I need to understand you as the whole person. And again, we are going to do this. The self-affirmations, they work. And one of the things you want to talk about, all the other things they bring into the classroom, that is a great way to address that, to get them thinking about it and getting them in a mindset to learn what you are there to teach. But we're going to do that next year. Yes.
So you need to create two, I'm gonna speak loud. Do you need to create two mentoring philosophies? For example, I'm a mentor in my classroom to those students, and then I also mentor students that are not in my classroom.
Right.
So do you need two, or do you just combine and make one large?
You do not need to. You really don't need to, and it's not something I would recommend, because the way you approach mentoring is the way you approach mentoring. When you start to get down into the weeds, that's when it turns into something different. So, or it can even flip into a teaching philosophy if you start to tailor it to a classroom. So I would say one, and make sure it sticks to mentoring principles, not necessarily teaching principles. Yeah. Jump here and I'll come back.
Can you please address the borderline between friendship and mentoring?
Wow. Yes. That is something that's hard to address, other than to say this. Everybody has to establish that line for themselves. And the reason I say that, because I see colleagues who are more distant from students than I think they should be. And I have a couple of colleagues where I say, that's a little close for me. But it's in no case do I think they're doing something wrong. So as far as that connection, I will tell you, I have a colleague, her students have her cell phone, they text her all hours of the night. That's not me. I love the students, but none of them have my cell phone. They have ample ways to get in touch with me if they need me, but that's not a level on which I want to engage my mentees. But that's my decision, just like her decision to give them her cell phone and engage them on that level is. That really is something you have to figure out, where your line is. And it is sometimes when you look at colleagues, you question your own line. You're like, well, they're doing this or they're not doing this. You have to be comfortable about, this is my approach to mentoring. This is what works, so this is my line. Yes.
I want to share just a rough draft, but it's read, I pledge to be available and to demonstrate compassion, empathy, and structure during our communicative process without becoming a part of your drama. So let that part out.
Smart.
You do you and be successful in your development. Because people are like, stay in your lane, you do you, I'm gonna do me. And I think some kind of way that should be woven in that tapestry, some kind of way. And I think this is kind of first cousin to your friendship question, to not become a part of their drama. Because then the waters get muddy and you might think I'm your friend. I am your friend in some ways, but I'm also a professional here to help you. But that whole drama piece, because sometimes I find myself kind of being sucked in.
Yeah.
They did this, and then I broke up, and then they gave me an STD, and then I
No. You do. You hear it. Which is why we're talking about mentoring and not just teaching, because you do hear it all. And honestly, I will always be the sounding board to hear it all. But the minute I hear that, my line is, let's get you to student health. That's my line is, okay, I heard that. Let's get you to student health because this is way outside of my purview. Okay, I'm seeing some things. Let's get you over to mental health services because something's going on. And that's you have resources on campus. You have to use those because most of the time, a lot of things that come to you are outside of your purview. Yes.
I'd like to clarify mentoring and advising.
It's a very good question. So, and I left that slide out. It's something I usually do. But in terms of an advisor tends to direct. In the big picture, an advisor will direct. Okay, you should take this class. You should do this. You should do that. Where a mentor, their tendency is to provide information, provide even their own history, and say, based on these things, the decision is yours. I have given you tools, I have given you information. I will even go back and forth with you about your rationale for the decisions you make, but that's not for me to say. And so my biggest difference is, yeah, when you're advising about a class to take or career advising, you direct, and it's like, okay, this is this, and this is probably your best option. Whereas a mentor, it takes a lot more time because first of all, you have to take in a lot of information to understand where this person is coming from. And then you provide them information that's going to help to inform the decision that's ultimately theirs. Does that help you in it? Okay. Okay. Okay, so we are. So again, this is just a brief reflection on taking a look at your list. And if it doesn't necessarily, if you need more clearly, you may need more time to reflect and figure out what things are important for you to include. So that's where this comes from. So I always like to start off with this saying. Somebody told this to me a long time ago, and the more years I'm in this, the more I realize it. Good mentors are developed. They are not born. Nobody's born being a good mentor. So the bottom line is you absolutely have to work. And this is what I meant when I said at the beginning, this is not easy. This is going to require effort on your part. This is an intentional process. But here's my call to action. Commit to a plan for completing your mentoring philosophy. If you want to take the summer and say, I'm gonna just work on this, and by the time classes start in the fall, my mentoring philosophy will be in place. I'm okay with that. Okay, and take the time to develop your mentoring competency. And here's what I mean by that. Because mentors are developed and not born, you have to make the effort to become a better mentor. You can do that by workshops and conferences, just like this one. So check to step 1. Congratulations. Colleagues, to me, that's one of your greatest resources. Look at the person next door. Look at their interaction with students. Look at what's working for them and what's not. talk to them when you're frustrated and you don't really know what to do in terms of mentoring one of your students. They are a great resource. Consult the scholarship on mentoring. It is amazing. It is an amazing body of work. And not only consult it, consider contributing to it. The more you do this, the more you're gonna find you learn. Be one of those people who say, here are my lessons learned. Let me contribute to this body of scholarship. And my favorite, mentor. Do it. The more you do it, it's like anything else. You will learn. And that's how you develop your competency as a mentor. I would be remiss if I did not mention the National Research Mentoring Network. For those of you who are not familiar, it is for everyone from undergraduates all the way through full professors. It doesn't matter your level, because I'm sure everybody in here in this room both has mentees and is also a mentee. So this is an online, it's interactive. There's so much you can mentor virtually. You can be mentored virtually. There are just so many resources here. So I just want to mention it and encourage you to explore it and join the NRMN. And thank you for your attention. And I have to say, I do not want to forget that, yes, I want to specifically thank Dr. Rondell Allen and Dr. Latasha Wade for the invitation. You all are the friendliest, I am from New Orleans, and in New Orleans, we don't care who you are. You walk down the street, you speak, you say hi, people you know, you don't know. I have never seen a friendlier group of people outside of New Orleans, so thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, and I also want to mention Ms. Jawanda Jackson, who is a delight. So thank you.